Devin Washington was 38 years old, a steady Atlanta architect with a good career, a beautiful home, and a marriage he believed in completely. The morning he buried his mother, Dorothy, he thought the worst thing he would face that day was grief. He was wrong. Dorothy Washington had built a $340 million empire from a single duplex, quietly, methodically, the way she did everything. She never told Patricia. And Patricia never thought to ask. So when Devin slipped away from his mother's repast and turned down the east hallway, what he saw stopped him cold. His wife of 8 years, standing close to another man, champagne flute raised, whispering, "She's finally gone, to getting our lives back." They never saw him standing there. And the next afternoon, in a downtown Atlanta conference room, when a lawyer read Dorothy's will aloud, every dollar, every property, every carefully constructed line, Patricia's glass wasn't the only thing that dropped. What happened next, neither of them saw coming. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The tie was navy. Dorothy had picked it out herself. She'd mailed it to him 3 weeks before she died, tucked inside a card that said nothing except, "Wear this to something important." No explanation. No occasion named. Just that. Her handwriting in blue ink, steady and unhurried. The same handwriting that had signed permission slips and birthday cards and the lease on her first duplex back in 1982. Devin stood at the mirror in his bedroom and worked the knot slowly. His hands knew what to do. The rest of him was somewhere else entirely. The room behind him was quiet. Morning light came through the curtains in flat, gray strips. Somewhere down the hall, he could hear Patricia moving. The soft click of a compact, the whisper of a dress being adjusted. Practiced sounds, efficient and calm. He finished the knot, pressed it flat against his chest with 2 fingers. "There you go, baby." He could hear Dorothy's voice so clearly it almost hurt. "Now, you look like somebody." She had been the kind of woman who filled a room without trying. Not with noise. Dorothy Washington never needed noise. She filled rooms with weight, with the specific gravity of someone who had built everything she had from nothing and knew, down to her bones, exactly what that cost. Devin had been 9 years old when he drew his first building. He'd done it on the back of a grocery bag. A big brown paper one that Dorothy had flattened and saved because she saved everything useful. He'd drawn a house with a wide front porch, and windows that were too big, and proportions that made no structural sense, and Dorothy had looked at it for a long time without saying anything. Then she'd pressed her palm flat against the paper. "Let it rest there. Feel that foundation," she'd said. "If it moves under your hand, you start over." He hadn't fully understood what she meant. Not then. He understood it now, in the way you understand things that take 20 years to finish landing. Completely. And with a kind of ache that had no clean name. She had been 71 years old. She had built a real estate empire from that single duplex. She had raised 2 children largely on her own, fed half a neighborhood without announcing it, and known, he believed this without question, almost everything worth knowing about almost everyone she'd ever met. Watch people's hands, baby, not their faces. Faces lie. Hands tell you what a person is actually doing. He adjusted the tie one final time, picked up his jacket from the chair. Patricia appeared in the doorway behind him, reflected in the mirror. She was dressed in black. Elegant, appropriate, precise. Her hair was pulled back. Her eyes, when they met his in the glass, arranged themselves into something soft and sorrowful. "You ready?" she said. Her voice was gentle. Her hand, when she crossed the room and touched his arm, was warm. "Yeah," he said. "Let's go." The church was full. That was the first thing Devin registered when they walked through the doors. Not the flowers, not the music, not the photograph of Dorothy on the easel near the pulpit. The fullness, every pew packed, people standing along the side aisles, faces he knew and faces he didn't, all of them carrying some version of the same thing. A genuine, specific loss. Dorothy Washington had not merely been wealthy, she had been woven into Atlanta's black professional community, into the neighborhood where she was born and had never fully left behind, into the lives of people who had received her help quietly and carried it with them for years. The church understood that. You could feel it in the room the way you feel weather, before it announces itself, before it has a name. Devon moved through the receiving line the way a man moves through deep water, present, muffled, accepting each hand, each embrace, each murmured word with the steady, contained composure his mother had modeled for him his entire life. Patricia was at his side, matching every note. The right response to the right person at the right moment. She knew every name. She placed every hand. She did not miss a single cue. He noticed, in a distant way, how good she was at it. The service was long and full and true. 3 eulogies, one from a pastor, one from a city councilwoman, one from a woman named Ruth who had worked with Dorothy for 20 years and cried through every sentence without stopping. Patricia excused herself once during the second eulogy. She was gone for perhaps 6 minutes. When she returned, she was composed, her eyes carrying just the right amount of contained emotion, her movements quiet and respectful. The third eulogy ended. The choir sang. Patricia excused herself again. 11 minutes this time. She returned the same way she had the first time. Composed, calibrated, grief managed into something that read, to anyone not paying close attention, as dignity. Devon was paying close attention. He had been an architect long enough to know the difference between a load-bearing wall and a decorative one. The difference was not always visible, but it was always structural. And structure, in the end, was the only thing that told the truth. The burial was graveside and private. The morning had gone gray by then, a flat sky pressing down over the small gathering of family and closest friends. The ground smelled like rain and clay. Devon stood at the head of the casket with Cass beside him, her hand tucked inside his elbow, neither of them speaking. When the pastor finished, when the others had stepped back, Devon crouched down. He pressed one hand flat against the casket's surface, the same way Dorothy had once pressed her palm against a grocery bag drawing, and held it there. He lowered his head. He whispered something. The words stayed between him and the polished wood and the gray Atlanta sky. Nobody heard them. That was the point. The procession back toward the vehicles moved slowly across the cemetery lawn. Small clusters of people speaking in low tones, the sound of gravel under dress shoes, a child's voice somewhere being hushed. Devon was walking beside Cass when he saw it. Patricia had drifted a few feet ahead of him, just enough to create a small gap in the procession. Natural-looking, unremarkable. She was looking toward the parking lot where the cars were lined up. Her head turned slightly, the way a person's head turns when they are scanning rather than grieving. And then she found him. Harlan Price stood near the far edge of the lot, speaking quietly with one of Dorothy's charitable associates. He was tall, silver-templed, unhurried in the way of a man who had spent 30 years being the steadiest person in difficult rooms. He had his hands in his coat pockets. He was not looking in Patricia's direction, but Patricia was looking at him. Her eyes landed on Harlan with a stillness that lasted no more than 2 or 3 seconds. Devon could not see her full expression from where he stood. Only the angle of her jaw, the set of her shoulders. But the stillness was different from grief. It was the stillness of someone doing arithmetic. Then Patricia turned her head back toward the cars. Her posture softened. Her chin dipped slightly. Grief, again, or what looked like it. Devon filed the moment the way he filed everything, without judgment, without conclusion, in a clean and separate compartment he would return to later when he had more information. He took Cass's arm and followed the procession toward Dorothy's estate. Dorothy's home had always been full of light. Even on gray days, and today was gray, the sky still low and flat from the morning, the estate caught it somehow. The high windows in the main rooms, the pale hardwood floors, the cream walls Dorothy had repainted every 3 years without fail. Because, she always said, a house tells you how its owner feels about themselves. The light found its way in and spread itself generously, the way Dorothy herself had. Now the rooms were full of people, and the light moved around them, and the smell of food was everywhere. Sweet potato, slow-cooked greens, cornbread still warm from someone's oven, the particular richness of a repast put together by a community that expressed love through feeding. Devon moved through it all on a kind of autopilot he did not choose and could not stop. He accepted each hand. He received each embrace. He nodded through stories he would not remember by nightfall. Dorothy at a city council meeting 20 years ago. Dorothy quietly paying someone's back rent. Dorothy showing up with groceries and not mentioning it again. Each story was true. He could tell. And each one cost him something small and irreplaceable to receive, because every true story about his mother was also, in some small way, the shape of what was gone. Patricia moved beside him through all of it, warm, fluent. Her hand found his arm at the right moments, when someone became emotional, when a story stretched long, when the silence after a memory needed filling. She introduced herself to people she hadn't met, placed names she had, asked follow-up questions that showed she was listening. She was very good at this. She had always been very good at this. At the 40-minute mark, something inside Devon's chest began to feel like a closed fist. He needed air. Not outside. Not the parking lot. Not the driveway. He needed the particular quiet that lived in the back of this house, in the east hallway, in the sunroom where Dorothy had kept her desk and her plants, and the stack of legal pads she used because she never trusted a computer with her real thinking. He touched Patricia's hand lightly. "I'll be back," and she gave him a small nod, already turning toward the next conversation, already recalibrating her attention with the seamless efficiency of someone who never fully stops working. He moved through the house the way he had moved through it for 30 years, past the dining room, past the photographs in the hallway. Dorothy at 30, at 45, at 60, her expression getting steadily quieter and more settled with each decade, as if she was progressively becoming more fully herself. Past the door to the guest room, toward the east hallway, he heard the voices before he saw them, low, unhurried, the specific register of a conversation that did not need to be careful because it believed it was alone. He slowed without deciding to. Patricia stood with her back partially to the doorway. She was close, too close, to a man Devon did not recognize. Mid-40s, well-dressed, a dark suit with a pocket square. His posture was relaxed. His weight was easy. He stood near her with the specific ease of someone who had earned his proximity over time and no longer thought about it. Each of them held a champagne flute. The bottle sat on the windowsill behind them. From Dorothy's kitchen. From the refrigerator Patricia knew the layout of because she had been in this house hundreds of times. The cork was on the sill beside it. Patricia's voice, low and unbothered. "She's finally gone. No more Sunday dinners. No more looks. No more of her quiet little comments." A pause. A small breath that might have been a laugh. "To getting our lives back." The glass came up. The man touched his flute to hers. Easy, natural, unhurried. They drank. Devon stood in the doorway for 3 full seconds. He was aware of very little in those 3 seconds. The sound of the repast somewhere behind him, voices, plates, someone's laughter, the flat gray light coming through the hallway window, the particular stillness of a moment that is rearranging everything and has not finished yet. Patricia turned. She saw him, her glass lowered. The color in her face shifted in a way that was not grief and was not surprise. It was something faster and more specific than either of those things. Her mouth opened. "Devon!" He looked at her. He looked at the man. He looked at the champagne. Then he turned and walked back down the hallway. Troy was in the kitchen, plate in hand, talking to somebody's uncle. Devon came up beside him and took him by the arm, not hard, not urgent, just steady and deliberate, and moved him toward the back porch, without announcing where they were going. The door closed behind them. The noise of the repast dropped away. Devon spoke quietly. 8 sentences. He did not edit anything, and he did not add anything. He described what he had seen the same way he would describe a structural problem on a job site. Specific, sequential, without commentary. Troy's jaw set. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "What do you need from me right now?" "I need to know who that man is." Troy went back inside. He was gone for 4 minutes. When he came back through the door, he had a name. Roland Briggs, a vendor in the events industry. Patricia had worked with him professionally for 3 years. A mutual acquaintance inside had seen them talking earlier and assumed it was business. Devon nodded once. He stored the name in the same clean compartment where he had stored Patricia's eyes, finding Harlan Price across the cemetery parking lot. He stored it carefully, without weight, the way you store a measurement you're not ready to use yet. Then he went back inside and finished the repast. Harlan Price's office was on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Atlanta, where the elevator moved slow, and the carpet was the color of charcoal. The kind of building that communicated, without saying anything, that serious decisions happened here. Devon had been here twice before. Once when Dorothy added him to the deed of her first commercial property. Once when she updated her healthcare directive 3 years ago. Both times the office had felt the same. Unhurried, organized, the air carrying the faint smell of old paper and leather. A place where things were made permanent. He arrived first, took a seat in the conference room at the long mahogany table, and placed both hands flat on the surface, and breathed. Patricia arrived 2 minutes later. She had dressed carefully. Navy dress, modest cut, pearl earrings that Devon recognized but could not place the occasion for. Her hair was pulled back. Her face held the exact expression that the morning required. Measured sorrow, quiet dignity, the composed grief of a woman who respected the formality of what was happening. She sat beside him, close but not pressing, her hands folded in her lap. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "I'm fine," he said. Cass arrived next. She set her bag on the table across from Patricia, pulled out her phone, and placed it screen down beside her notepad. She did not look at Patricia. She did not look away from her either. She simply settled into her chair with the unhurried stillness of a woman who had been waiting a long time for this particular morning. Dorothy's 3 charitable associates arrived together. 2 women and a man, all of them in their 60s, all of them dressed in black. They had known Dorothy for decades. One of them, a woman named Gloria, touched Devon's shoulder on her way to her seat, and didn't say anything. That was enough. Harlan came in last. He set a folder on the table, adjusted his glasses, and took his seat at the head of the table without preamble. He had the specific gravity of a man who understood exactly what he was holding and took that responsibility seriously. "Thank you all for being here," he said. "We'll proceed." He read the way Dorothy would have wanted, plainly, without performance. The estate of Dorothy Yvonne Washington. Commercial real estate holdings across 14 properties in the Atlanta metropolitan area. Private equity positions in 3 regional companies. Liquid assets, trusts, Accounts. When Harlan said the number, approximately $340 million, the room shifted. Not dramatically, but something in the air changed, the way pressure changes before weather. Gloria pressed her lips together. One of the other associates exhaled slowly through his nose. Patricia went very still. Not grief still. Not the stillness of someone absorbing loss. This was a different kind of still. The specific, focused stillness of someone doing rapid math. Harlan continued. The estate transferred in its entirety to Devin Anthony Washington. Charitable bequests totaling $14 million directed through a designated housing trust. Dorothy's personal effects itemized and distributed among family as noted in the attached schedule. Harlan turned a page. Patricia Washington receives nothing. He said it the same way he said everything else. Same volume, same pace. He let the sentence sit. Patricia's hands, folded in her lap, did not move. But something behind her eyes did. Devin was not looking at her directly. He was looking at the folder in front of Harlan. But he could see her in his peripheral vision, the way you learn to see things when you have spent 8 years sleeping beside someone. The way her chin dropped a fraction of an inch. The way her shoulders rearranged themselves very slightly under the fabric of her dress. Harlan reached for a small recorder on the table. He pressed play. Dorothy's voice filled the room. It hit Devin somewhere below his sternum. He had not expected to hear her voice. He had not prepared for it, and there was no preparing for it. She sounded exactly like herself. Unhurried, direct, with the dry warmth underneath everything she said that people either loved about her or found unsettling. I leave nothing to my son's wife, because I know my son's wife. I have known her for some time. Devin is a slow reader of people. He has always been. But he finishes every book he starts. I am not worried about my son. The recording ended. The silence that followed was total and complete. Cass looked down at her notepad. Gloria, across the table, did not move. Patricia's face was still composed. The composure itself was the tell. It was working too hard. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were moving in the particular way of someone who is not seeing the room in front of them, but is instead seeing a long row of decisions and recalculating every single one. Devin watched it happen and felt nothing that resembled satisfaction. He felt something quieter and heavier than that. Something that had no clean name. In the elevator, the doors had not yet closed before Patricia turned to him. Devin, your mother, she... Not now. The doors opened. He walked to his car. Outside on the sidewalk, he sat behind the wheel for 4 minutes without starting the engine. Through the windshield he could see Patricia standing on the concrete, her phone already pressed to her ear, her face moving through expressions she was not monitoring carefully enough. Her free hand rose once, then dropped. He started the car. He drove home. He called her at 9:47 that night. She picked up on the second ring, which told him she had been waiting for it. Breakfast, he said. Tomorrow. Early. Tell me where. He named a diner on the south side of the city, a place with vinyl booths and good coffee, and no connection to anything Patricia had ever touched. Cass said she'd be there at 7. He hung up and sat in the dark of his home office for a long time, listening to the sound of Patricia moving through the house, the soft click of the bathroom door, the low murmur of the television in the bedroom. The ordinary sounds of a marriage he was looking at differently now, the way you look at a wall differently once you know there's no structure behind it. The diner smelled like bacon grease and coffee and something faintly sweet. Pancake batter, maybe. It was the kind of place that had been there for decades and would be there for decades more because it didn't need to be anything other than what it was. Devin was already in a corner booth when Cass arrived, her coat still buttoned, a leather tote over one shoulder. She slid in across from him. A waitress came, poured coffee without asking, and left 2 laminated menus they both ignored. Cass wrapped both hands around her mug and looked at him. "How long?" he asked. She understood the question. She set her mug down. "2 years I've been watching," she said. "Not following her around, just paying attention. She asked you once about the vesting schedule on your pension. Do you remember that?" He didn't. "About 3 years ago, you were at Sunday dinner at Mama's, and she brought it up casually, like she was just curious, like it was small talk." Cass shook her head. It wasn't small talk. The way she framed the question, she already knew the basic structure. She was filling in a specific gap. She paused. "I'm a forensic accountant, Devon. When somebody already knows the shape of your money, it's because they looked it up." He was quiet. Outside, a car passed on the wet street. "She did the same thing with your property holdings," Cass continued. "About 18 months ago, she mentioned the equity on the Decatur property to a friend of hers at a dinner party. Casually. The exact number. Not an approximate. The exact number." She picked up her coffee again. "I checked. That number wasn't on any document she would have had natural access to. She went looking." Devon turned his mug slowly on the table. He said nothing. Cass reached into her tote and pulled out her phone. She set it flat on the table between them, didn't push it toward him yet. 3 months ago," she said, "I was driving through Buckhead, coming back from a client meeting, late afternoon, the kind of day where everything runs long." She paused. "I saw her." He looked up. She was coming out of a restaurant on Peachtree, the kind of place you don't go to for a working lunch. It's got a wine list and candles at 2 in the afternoon. Cass held his gaze. She was with him. Roland Briggs. They were close. Not touching, but close in the way people are when they've already touched. He held the door for her. She laughed at something he said before they even reached the sidewalk. She pushed the phone across the table. "I took these. I didn't fully know why at the time. I just knew I needed to." Devon picked up the phone. 4 photographs, all taken from a distance, through a car window. The first showed them stepping onto the sidewalk together. The second showed Briggs's hand briefly at the small of Patricia's back as they moved toward the parking deck. The third was a profile shot. Patricia laughing, her head tilted slightly toward him, the gap between them deliberate but small. The fourth was the clearest, both of them facing each other on the sidewalk, Patricia's hand raised in a gesture that was familiar, comfortable, the kind of movement you don't perform for someone you work with. Devon studied each one. He did not rush. He looked at them the way he looked at a structural drawing, taking in every detail, finding the load-bearing elements, measuring the distance. He set the phone down. "When was this?" His voice was level. 14 weeks ago. 14 weeks. He did the math without meaning to. 14 weeks ago, Dorothy had just been moved to home hospice. 14 weeks ago, Devon had been driving to his mother's house 3 nights a week and sitting beside her bed and holding her hand and reading to her from a book she'd loved for 30 years. "How long do you think it's been going on?" he asked. Cass's expression did not change. She had clearly already thought about how to answer this. "Based on what I've seen," she said, "and the behavioral pattern before that, at least 2 years, maybe more. 2 years. He let that number sit where it landed. He did not push it away. He did not reach for anything to soften it. He let it be exactly the size it was. The waitress refilled their coffee. Neither of them had eaten anything. After a long moment, Cass said, "I think you need to call Harlan." Devon nodded once. He picked up the check before she could reach for it, left cash on the table, and walked out to the parking lot. He stood beside his car in the cold morning air and found Harlan's number and pressed call. Harlan Price's office was on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Atlanta that had been there since before Devon was born. The furniture was dark wood and worn leather. The bookshelves were full of real books that had been opened and used. There were no plants, no decorative objects, nothing on the walls that wasn't a framed document of some kind. It was the office of a man who had no interest in performing competence. only in delivering it. Harlan was standing at the window when Devon arrived. The city spread out below him in the gray afternoon light. He turned when the door opened, shook Devon's hand with both of his, and gestured toward the chair across from his desk. "I appreciate you coming after hours," Devon said. "I've been waiting for this conversation," Harlan said. "Your mother knew I would be." He sat down. Devon sat across from him. Harlan folded his hands on the desk and looked at Devon the way a man looks at someone he has known across decades, with the specific patience of a person who has earned the right to speak plainly. "Your mother retained a private investigator 18 months ago," he said. "She did not tell you. She did not tell Cass. She told me, and she told me only what was necessary for the legal work to proceed correctly." Devon said nothing. He waited. She had a feeling about Patricia that she'd carried for some time. "You know how your mother was with people." Harlan paused. She didn't act on feelings. She gathered evidence. "What did the investigator find?" Harlan opened the desk drawer to his left and removed a manila folder, thick, well organized, held shut with a binder clip. He set it on the desk but did not open it yet. "3 weeks before your mother died," he said, "the investigator documented that Patricia had retained a divorce attorney." He let that word land before continuing. "Not a consultation. Not an exploratory phone call. She retained one. Formally. Paid a retainer. Through a referral that was specifically chosen to avoid anyone in your mutual professional or social network." The room was very quiet. "She hadn't filed yet," Harlan continued. "She was waiting. The investigator's assessment, consistent with your mother's own read of the situation, was that Patricia was timing the filing deliberately. She wanted to maximize her claim. Your firm equity, your personal property holdings, your pension vesting schedule?" He paused. She had done her research. Devon thought of what Cass had said that morning. She already knew the shape of your money. "There's more," Harlan said. Devon held his gaze. "Tell me." The investigator documented a conversation between Patricia and Roland Briggs, in some detail. Harlan's voice did not change in tone or pace. He spoke the way he always spoke, steadily, without embellishment. Patricia told Briggs that she expected her settlement to be significant. She used the word significant specifically. She said that once the divorce resolved and she had access to her portion of the marital assets, she intended to invest as a partner in his business expansion. Devon sat completely still. "She wasn't just planning to leave you," Harlan said. "She had already decided what she was going to do with what she took from you." A long moment passed. A car horn sounded somewhere far below. Devon heard it distantly, the way you hear something through water. "My mother knew all of this before she died," he said. "Yes, and she didn't say anything to me." Harlan looked at him carefully. "She knew what telling you would and wouldn't accomplish. You weren't ready to see it. Not because you were weak, but because you are the kind of man who requires evidence over instinct. She respected that about you. So she built the evidence, and she protected the estate, and she trusted you to find your way to this room." Devon looked at the folder on the desk. He thought about his mother in her hospital bed in those last weeks, knowing all of this and saying nothing about it, holding it alone, making decisions alone, still protecting him even while she was dying. He reached across the desk. He opened the folder. He read it the way he read everything, completely, without skipping, giving each page the full weight of his attention. The investigator's notes were meticulous. Dates, locations, documented conversations, records of Patricia's legal consultation, financial movement, the Briggs discussions itemized across 2 separate recorded exchanges. It was thorough in the way that only a document commissioned by Dorothy Washington could be thorough. He read to the last page. He closed the folder. He set his hands flat on top of it. "She stayed because of the will reading," he said. His voice was quiet and entirely certain. "She heard 340 million, and she reversed everything." Harlan said, "Yes." Devon looked up at him. "File everything." Harlan nodded. The house smelled like food when Devon walked in. That was the first thing. The smell. Garlic. And something braised, warm bread. The particular weight of a kitchen that had been worked in for hours. He stood in the entryway for a moment and just let it land. Patricia appeared at the kitchen doorway. She had changed out of the clothes she'd worn that day into something soft and casual. Her hair was down. She looked deliberately, carefully, like a woman who had spent the afternoon doing something tender for her husband. "I made your mother's short rib recipe," she said. "The one from the index cards in the recipe box. I hope that's okay." He looked at her. "That's thoughtful," he said. He set his keys on the entryway table and walked to the kitchen. She had set the table properly. Candles, the good plates, a glass of red wine already poured at his seat, the bottle left open on the counter the way he preferred. Every detail was correct. Every detail had been considered. They ate. Patricia talked, softly, carefully, about Dorothy, about things she said she wished she had done differently. She said she regretted not being closer to her. She said she understood now, in the way grief sometimes clarifies things, how much distance had grown between them that she wished hadn't. "I kept waiting for the right moment to try harder with her," Patricia said. She looked down at her plate. "I don't know why I kept waiting." Devon cut a piece of meat. "People do that," he said. She looked up at him. Something moved behind her eyes, a quick reading, a scan for meaning beneath the words. She found nothing useful and looked back down. He ate. He listened. He gave her nothing. Over the days that followed, she became someone else. She was present in the mornings, up when he was, asking about his day before it started. She touched his face when she passed him in the hallway. She left a coffee on his desk in the home office without announcing it, the way someone does when they want to be noticed for not making a production out of things. She cried once in the living room, quietly. About Dorothy, she said. About time. About how short everything was. He sat beside her when she cried. He put his hand on her back. He did not pull away. She used the word together the way some people use punctuation. Together we could steward this properly. Together we could figure out what the estate really needs. Together, the word landing again and again, soft and deliberate. A thread she was trying to weave through everything. He heard it every time. Troy came by on a Thursday afternoon, while Patricia was out running errands she had mentioned twice before leaving, as if establishing the alibi of an ordinary life. They sat on the back porch. It was cool for the season. The yard was still and brown at the edges, the way Atlanta yards go in the fall. Troy wrapped his hands around a mug of coffee and looked out at the yard for a moment before he spoke. "Briggs was at the repast," he said. Devon looked at him. "He wasn't on any list," Troy said. "He wasn't invited. A buddy of mine from the west side, Marcus, you've met him. He remembered seeing a man he didn't recognize near the east hallway, and mentioned it to me when I asked around." Troy paused. "I showed him a photo. He confirmed it. The yard was very quiet." "She told him to come," Devon said. "It wasn't a question." "That's what it looks like." Troy set his mug down. "She wanted him there. On that specific day, in that specific house." He let a beat pass. She wanted him close when she thought everything was about to change for her. Devon was quiet for a long moment. He thought about Roland Briggs moving through Dorothy's home, eating Dorothy's food, standing among people who had loved his mother for decades, walking those hallways while Devon accepted condolences in the next room. He thought about the champagne flute. He thought about the toast. "She brought him to my mother's funeral," he said, quietly, just the fact of it, set down plainly. Troy said nothing. He understood that some things don't need a response. He picked up his mug and let the silence do what silence does. That night, over dinner, another meal Patricia had cooked, the second in 3 days, She set down her fork and looked at him with an expression she had clearly prepared. "I've been thinking," she said, "about us, about what comes next." She folded her hands on the table. "I want to be a real partner to you in this, Devon. Not just your wife in name. A real partner. Together. In everything the estate means. Everything your mother built." She held his gaze. "I want that for us." He looked at her across the table. He took a slow breath. "I hear you," he said. "I do. But I think I need some time first. Just to grieve properly. Some space to get my head right." She nodded immediately. Too immediately. "Of course," she said. "Whatever you need. I'm not going anywhere." He smiled. Small, controlled, unreadable. "I know," he said. He stood and carried his plate to the sink. He turned on the water and began washing the dishes, his back to the room, steady and unhurried. Behind him, he could feel Patricia watching him from the table, patient, certain, still holding the timeline she believed was hers to control. He washed each dish carefully and put it where it belonged. The attorney's name was Sandra Osei. Harlan had recommended her, not because she was the most aggressive divorce attorney in Atlanta, though she was, but because she was precise in the specific way that Harlan respected. She did not add drama to a situation that already had plenty. She built cases the way engineers build bridges, load-bearing only. Nothing decorative. Her office was on the 14th floor of a building in Midtown. Clean lines, good light, a desk that held only what belonged on it. Devon liked her immediately. He sat across from her on a Wednesday morning and laid everything out. Not emotionally, architecturally. The timeline, the documentation, the investigator's file Harlan had forwarded to her the previous day. He spoke for 20 minutes without being interrupted. Sandra Osei took notes in a small, precise hand and asked 4 questions when he finished. Then she told him exactly what they were going to do. Across town, in a conference room at her firm, Cass sat alone with 3 months of bank records, joint account statements, and a forensic timeline she had been building in pieces since the morning after the will reading. She worked the way she always worked, quiet, methodical, following the numbers the way a contractor follows a crack in a foundation wall, back to its source, down to its cause. Patricia had not known about Dorothy's empire. That was clear. If she had known, really known, the liquidations would have looked different, larger, more desperate. What Cass found instead was something smaller, and in some ways worse: patience, discipline. The financial behavior of a woman who had already made her decision and was simply preparing for it without making noise. 8 months of transactions, incremental, spread across 4 joint accounts, small enough individually to pass unnoticed in the ordinary rhythm of a household's finances. Transfers tagged with labels that sounded routine, household reserves, vendor reimbursement, tax planning, and routed through a single private account registered in Patricia's name only. $87,000. Not stolen in a moment of panic. Moved with intention, over time, by someone who understood that clean exits require preparation. Cass documented every transaction, every transfer, every fabricated label. She cross-referenced the 8-month window against Patricia's communications with her divorce attorney. The timeline overlapped cleanly, completely, with the period when Patricia had been formally retained for filing preparation. She packaged everything: bank records, account registration, transaction logs, annotated timeline. She sent it to Sandra Osei at 11:14 in the morning. Sandra called Devon that afternoon. He was still in the car from their morning meeting, parked outside a coffee shop, not yet ready to go home. "We have everything we need," she said. "The $87,000 liquidation attaches as an asset fraud claim. Combined with the documented affair, the prior divorce attorney retention, and the investigator's file, the filing is comprehensive." A pause. "She has no viable counterposition." "When can we file?" Devon asked. I can have the paperwork complete by end of week, Sandra said. She'll be served early next week. Do it. She was served on a Wednesday morning. Patricia was standing at the kitchen counter when the process server knocked. She had a mug in one hand and her phone in the other, scrolling through something. The knock was polite, ordinary. She answered the door the way she answered most things, composed, present, calibrated. The envelope was manila, standard. The process server confirmed her name, handed it over, and left. She stood at the open door for a moment before closing it. She set her mug down. She set her phone down. She opened the envelope. She read it standing at the counter, and the reading took longer than it should have because she had to go back twice. Once when she reached the asset fraud claim, and once when she reached the itemized documentation of the $87,000, her name, on a private account she had opened quietly and never mentioned. Every transfer listed, every fabricated label named for exactly what it was. She put the papers down on the counter with both hands flat on top of them. Then she picked up her phone and called Roland Briggs. He answered on the third ring. She told him what had happened. She kept her voice controlled and even, the way she kept most things. But underneath the control, her words were coming faster than usual. She told him about the filing, the fraud claim, the documentation. She said Devon had everything. Roland Briggs was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was measured, careful. The warmth that usually lived in it had receded to somewhere she couldn't locate. He said he was sorry she was going through this. He said it sounded complicated. He said he wasn't sure there was anything he could do right now, given the situation, given how visible everything had apparently become, given the situation. She hung up. She stood at the counter for a long moment with the papers beneath her hands. Then she picked up her phone again and called Devon. He answered on the second ring. "We need to talk," she said. His voice was calm, unhurried, the same voice he had used for weeks now, steady, unreadable, offering her nothing to hold on to. "Yes," he said. "Bring your attorney." The conference room was on the 22nd floor of a building in downtown Atlanta. Clean light came through the windows, a long table, 6 chairs, a water pitcher nobody touched. Devon arrived first with Sandra and Harlan. He chose the seat facing the door. He set a single envelope on the table in front of him and left it closed. Sandra placed her files to his right. Harlan placed nothing. He didn't need to. Patricia arrived 7 minutes later with her attorney, a man named Gerald Fitch, who wore his suit like a man accustomed to being the most prepared person in a room. He nodded at Sandra. He did not nod at Harlan. He pulled out Patricia's chair before taking his own. Patricia sat down. She was dressed carefully. Navy. Simple jewelry. Her hair pulled back. She looked the way she always looked in professional settings. Composed, present, impossible to read at a glance. Her hands came to rest on the table, one folded over the other. She looked at Devon. He was already looking at her. Gerald Fitch opened his folder and began to speak. Standard procedural language, acknowledgement of the filing, readiness to discuss terms. Devon said, "I'd like 5 minutes before the attorneys begin." Fitch looked up. "That's not really how—" "I'd like 5 minutes," Devon said again. Same tone. No harder than the first time. Fitch turned to Patricia. Patricia held Devon's gaze for a moment. Then she said, "It's fine, Gerald." Fitch sat back. He didn't like it, but he sat back. Devon did not open the envelope. Not yet. He spoke the way he designed, from structure. No decoration. Load-bearing only. 3 weeks ago, he said, I walked down the east hallway of my mother's house during her repast. You were standing in that hallway with Roland Briggs. You each had a glass of champagne from her kitchen. You said, and I am going to be exact, she's finally gone. No more Sunday dinners. No more looks. To getting our lives back. You raised your glass. He raised his. You both drank. The room was very still. "I've known Roland Briggs's name since that afternoon," Devon said. "What I've confirmed since then is that the two of you have been involved for approximately 2 years. Not a recent mistake. 2 years. The affair began in year 6 of our marriage." Patricia's hands, folded on the table, did not move. "I also know," he continued, "that you retained a divorce attorney 14 months ago. Formally retained, not a consultation. You were waiting for the right financial moment to file. You brought Roland Briggs to my mother's funeral because you expected that day to be the beginning of something for you. The will reading was supposed to confirm that the exit was worth taking." He paused, just a beat. "And then it wasn't what you expected. So you stayed. You cooked dinner. You used the word together like it was a tool." He said it plainly, without cruelty. "The $87,000 is documented completely. Every transfer, every account, every label you put on it to make it look routine." Fitch leaned toward Patricia and said something low. She shook her head once, sharp. Devon reached for the envelope. He opened it and removed a single folded page. He unfolded it carefully. "The way you handle something that belongs to someone else." "My mother left a letter," he said. "I'm going to read part of it." He found the passage. His voice stayed level. "Patricia never loved you, baby. I want you to know I say that without anger. I say it because you deserve the truth more than you deserve protection from it. She saw a life when she looked at you. Not a man, a life, a position, a door. I watched her work that room at your wedding and I knew. I should have found a way to tell you. That is the only thing I would do differently." He paused. "You deserved someone who chose you because of who you are, not what you represented. I am sorry it took this long for you to see it. I am not sorry for what comes next." He folded the letter once and set it down. "Build what's next, baby. You always built better than you knew." The room held that. Patricia's composure did not shatter. It was slower than that. It moved across her face the way a crack moves through concrete. Quiet, structural, the kind of damage that announces itself only after the full weight lands. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes went somewhere that wasn't the room. She looked, for the first time in the years Devon had known her, like someone who had arrived at an ending she had no script for. Not grief, not guilt, just the expression of a woman who had played every piece correctly and still lost the board. Fitch recognized it. He leaned forward. "I'd like to recommend," he said quietly, "that we discuss settlement terms." Sandra opened her folder. The terms were already written. No claim on the Washington estate. Full restitution of $87,000. No alimony. Divorce granted. Fitch reviewed it. He spoke to Patricia in a low professional voice. She listened. She did not look at Devon. She picked up the pen. She signed. Devon stood. He buttoned his jacket. He reached across the table and shook Harlan's hand. Firm, brief, the handshake of a man completing something. And then he walked to the door and opened it. He walked out first. The settlement was signed on a Thursday. By Friday, Roland Briggs was sitting across from a deposition attorney, answering questions he had not expected to answer. His own lawyer had explained the situation clearly the night before. The asset fraud documentation, Cass's audit, the transaction records, the traced accounts, included a conversation. A documented conversation between Roland and Patricia, in which she described the liquidation plan in enough detail to suggest he had known about it. Not suspected. Known. His attorney used the word proximity. Roland understood what that meant. He cooperated fully. Every question, a complete answer. He confirmed the affair. He confirmed the timeline. He confirmed the conversation about the settlement, the investment partnership, the money Patricia expected to walk away with. He confirmed all of it without hesitation and without apparent remorse, in the specific, measured way of a man who has decided that protecting himself is the only geometry that matters. His attorney sent a formal letter to Sandra's office the same afternoon. Roland Briggs was publicly distancing himself from Patricia Washington, personally and professionally, effective immediately. Patricia received a copy of that letter at 11:14 in the morning. She was standing in the bedroom of the Washington home, surrounded by boxes. She had hired movers, 2 of them. They were efficient and quiet, and they did not ask questions about why the woman directing them kept checking her phone with the particular stillness of someone waiting for a sound that didn't come. She called Roland at 11:17. It rang 4 times, then voicemail. His voice, calm and professional, asking her to leave a message. She didn't leave one. She called again at 11:31. Same result. She put her phone in her jacket pocket and stood in the middle of the bedroom and looked at the walls. The movers came and went around her, carrying boxes through the door, folding the life she had assembled in this house into cardboard and tape. She did not call a 3rd time. The professional consequences arrived the same way Dorothy Washington had always operated, quietly and completely. 3 clients, each one a significant contract. Each one reached Patricia through a phone call from someone they trusted, someone who mentioned, gently, briefly, that they were going in a different direction this year. No announcement, no public statement, no explanation that required defending. The Atlanta event planning world Patricia had built was not really hers. It had always been borrowed. Access extended through the Washington name, through Devon's professional standing, through the community Dorothy had spent 40 years earning. That community did not make noise about its decisions. It simply made them. By the end of the following week, her calendar had 3 fewer anchor accounts than it had the week before. And the phone, which used to ring with referrals the way referrals move in tight communities, one call leading to another, had gone quiet in a way that felt less like a pause and more like a conclusion. The last box out of the Washington home was a small one. Cass was there when the movers finished. She had come to walk through the house with Devon, to document the condition, to make sure nothing was missing. And she had done that efficiently, room by room, clipboard in hand, the way she did everything. In the spare room, on the closet shelf, there was a box Patricia had labeled D. Washington, Personal Effects. Cass opened it. Inside, carefully arranged, was Dorothy's personal journal, the one from the study, the one with the burgundy cover, and the worn gold lettering on the spine that Devon had looked for and not found in the weeks after the funeral. Cass stood there for a moment. She picked the journal up with both hands. She carried it out of the room and down the hall, and found Devon on the back porch where the afternoon light came in flat and even across the yard. She handed it to him without a word. He looked at it. He recognized it immediately. The texture of the cover, the small dent in the bottom right corner from the time it had fallen off Dorothy's desk and landed against the baseboard. He had been 9 years old when it happened. He remembered because his mother had picked it up without breaking her sentence. He sat down. He opened it to the last page with writing on it. The entry was dated 11 days before Dorothy died. Her handwriting was smaller than it used to be, deliberate, like she was being careful with the space. He read it. I have done everything I know to do. The rest belongs to Devon. He is stronger than he knows. He gets that from me. He read it twice. Then he closed the journal carefully, the way you close something that belongs to someone who is still, in some way, present. Troy was leaning against the porch railing. He had been there the whole time. Quiet, the way Troy got quiet, when quiet was what the moment needed. You good? Troy said. Devon held the journal in both hands. He looked out at the yard, the oak tree his mother had planted the year he was born, the garden bed she had kept until her hands wouldn't let her anymore. I'm getting there, he said. 8 months is not a long time. It is long enough, though, long enough to file the paperwork, long enough to close out the joint accounts and sign the transfer documents and sit with Harlan 3 separate times to understand fully what Dorothy had left him and what she expected him to do with it. Long enough to draw something. The drawing had taken him 11 days. He did it by hand, the way his mother always preferred. She had never trusted a design she couldn't trace with her finger. "If I can't follow the line," she used to say, "how do I know you know where it goes?" So he had drawn it by hand, pencil first, then ink, on large sheets of drafting paper spread across the dining room table. He had worked in the mornings, early, before the city got loud. He had drunk his coffee and drawn, and on the 6th morning he had looked up from the table and understood that it was good. That it was, in fact, the best thing he had ever made. The project was a mixed-income residential development, 48 units, a community garden on the east side of the lot, a small flex space on the ground floor for neighborhood programming, modest materials executed with care, the kind of building that said you belong here without saying anything at all. The lot was on Campbellton Road in southwest Atlanta, 4 blocks from where Dorothy Washington had purchased her first duplex in 1982 with money she had saved across 7 years of working 2 jobs. The duplex was still there. Devin drove past it on his way to the groundbreaking. The ceremony was held on a Tuesday morning in October, when the Atlanta heat had finally eased and the sky was the particular clean blue that only came in fall. There were more people than he had expected. Community members who had known Dorothy for decades, women who had been in her church auxiliary, men who had worked on properties she managed, younger people who simply knew her name and what it stood for. A city councilwoman came and brought her chief of staff. The pastor from Dorothy's church came and brought 3 deacons. A local news camera set up near the back. Troy was already on site when Devin arrived. He was in a hard hat and work boots, talking to 2 of his foremen near the equipment line. But he broke off when he saw Devin's car and walked over with his hand already extended. "How you feeling?" Troy said. "Ready," Devin said. Troy nodded. That was enough. Cass was near the podium talking to the councilwoman's chief of staff, a folder tucked under one arm, her reading glasses pushed up on top of her head. She had left her firm 6 months ago and joined the Washington estate management team without fanfare, the way Cass did everything. She simply showed up one morning and started working, and the work was immediately better than it had been before. She caught Devin's eye across the crowd and gave him a single nod. He nodded back. The councilwoman spoke first, then the pastor. Both of them spoke about Dorothy, about what she had meant to this part of the city, about the families she had housed through her affordable units, about the way she showed up when institutions didn't. The pastor quoted scripture, and then set the scripture aside and just talked about Dorothy directly, the way people talk about someone they actually knew. The crowd laughed in the right places. A few people wiped their eyes. Devin spoke last. He stood at the podium without notes. He talked about Dorothy for most of it. About the duplex 4 blocks away. About the grocery bag she saved when he was 9 years old so he could draw on the back of it. About the way she used to press her palm flat against whatever he was building and ask him if the foundation moved. He kept it short. He knew his mother had not liked speeches that went on past their purpose. He paused at the end. He looked out at the crowd, at Troy in his hard hat, at Cass with her folder, at the faces of people who had loved his mother and were now standing on the ground where something new was going to be built. He said, "She used to say that the most dangerous thing a person can do is underestimate someone who builds quietly." He let that sit for just a moment. "I've decided to take that personally." The crowd laughed. Not politely. Genuinely. The warm and easy laughter of people who recognized something true. Devin smiled. Patricia had relocated to Charlotte. Her events coordinating business, rebuilt from scratch and without the Washington name to open doors, was small and slow. Roland Briggs had moved on. New business, new woman. not a backward glance. The Atlanta network that had once made her phone ring with opportunities now had no particular reason to know she existed. She was not ruined in any dramatic sense. She simply occupied a life that was several sizes smaller than the one she had planned for, and in a city that had no memory of her at all. On Sunday morning, Devon drove to the cemetery alone. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels earned. He parked, walked across the grass, and stood at the stone. He stood there for a moment without speaking. A bird moved somewhere in the trees above him. The sky was the same clean blue it had been at the groundbreaking. "I finished the book, Mama," he said. A beat. "Started a new one, too." He stood there a moment longer. Then he walked back to his car, started the engine, and pulled out of the lot. He had somewhere to be. The foundation didn't build itself. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.